Well, another quintessential, I guess, prototype that has a lot of fame in addition to the Rocket Fett is the talking Yoda doll. But here we have a couple of different versions of concepts that they were looking at for Yoda. One was the talking version, and then the other was a Yoda puppet. And you can see that the Yoda puppet was nixed due to cost, as I recall.
That's right, yeah, it was too expensive. They looked at what it would cost to manufacture it and said too expensive, so they ended up going with the rather lame plastic Yoda puppet. Some of you might know about if you know the vintage Kenner line. That was the replacement for this. And then there's the, I think, really awesome pull-string Yoda toy. I'm amazed they didn't make this one, but it's great. It has like about 8 or 10 different expressions when you pull the string. It actually had recordings from the movie, so it wasn't some approximation. It was actually using the technology at the time, actually recordings from Empire Strikes Back. But it would have been one of the earliest plush toys. And here are some other prototypes from Talking Yoda and the Yoda puppet. I mean, there are examples here of wax sculpts of Yoda's hands and feet. There are hard copy pieces as well. There are, for the Yoda puppet, all the bigger Yoda heads. There are some first shots of those for the earliest tests in the steel molds that they do in plastic. There's a rotocast mold, which actually, sorry. Those weren't mold injected, they're all rotocast, and so they're in a metal mold like this on the lower left, and so what they do is they fill it with the rubbery plastic material, spin it really fast, and then creates a hollow version of the Yoda head. And so a lot of dolls will have hollow plastic pieces, and so they'll have this kind of rotocast mold where you look at the outside of the mold, it looks kind of weird, like around the ears you see it's kind of got all these kind of weird artifacts. Well, the thing is, the outside of the mold is not what's relevant, it's what's on the inside of the mold. That's what creates the shape.
It's funny, the expression that you have there on Yoda's face, but I guess if you have someone's hand up you might have a similar expression. One of the things when you're collecting as prototypes or anything along those lines is to get kind of a run or a large group or sample of all the different stages of production. And so this is very, very popular with prototype collectors, is that you want to show every single step of the way. How is this thing created when it goes from the design process to the finished product? And so, we'll have the original carvings in the wax and the hard copies that they will make off of that, or you might have a sculpt, a mold that will be made off of the wax that they'll then use to make a Dynacast hard copy, which is the dark green there.
And other things like in the back, you can see the Yoda head that looks like there's writing on it and some hair coming out. That's a rooting master. So that's for toys like particularly dolls that have hair sewn into them. There's a process called rooting where they take the hair, the kind of artificial hair samples, and they have particular points where they sew it into the plastic. And so on Yoda, they have a rooting master, which in the factory they're able to say, okay, this is where I'm going to thread the hair and mark all the details of how to do the hair, so they can consistently produce it in the factory to make it have that look. So now we'll transition to the micro collection. So this was a line that Kenner had around 1982, where basically it was a set of small-scale play sets and unposable figures, small metal figures. Now, today, this is very popular with collectors. Back in the day, this actually didn't do very well. It was, a lot of the stuff stayed in overstock for years. But anyway, from that line, the micro collection line, these small play sets, since they canceled the line very shortly after they introduced it, around 1983, they had considered additional expansion of the line with other playsets. So this is from the Hoth world. They were going to add a Bacta chamber playset. And as they got further along on the micro collection, they were considering extra features. Like, so for example, the Bacta chamber could actually fill with water, so that you could, put Luke in to the Bacta tank, and you could have the water filling up or draining out. And they did it in a way where they had a cavity around where Luke would go, so you wouldn't actually get the metal figure wet. It would actually go around the metal figure. So anyway, this is a prototype from that line. That, there's only a couple that have surfaced so far, and this one actually has the box with it. But this was what would have happened with the micro line had they continued. They would have made this playset.
The figures are a little bit easier to find today. You can find them in unpainted state usually. So a lot of prototype collectors will have some of those in their collection. Finding the painted samples are very, very difficult, and as Gus said, the play sets are just about impossible to find. So the torture chamber is another item that's similar to the Bacta chamber that they were going to make. This one had 6 figures that were going to come with it. Again, the painted ones, pretty difficult to find. The unpainted ones, figures you can still find. But this had some great playability to show your kids, how to torture Han Solo. There's a little rack there that you can lower him down for some electrocution, and a little conveyor belt that you can put the pieces of C-3PO on to incinerate him, and just all kinds of fun things. An Ugnaught holding a droid part. So can't imagine why it didn't make it out there. So this is called a Dilux. This is the torture chamber box as it would look in just a blue line. So this is a stage where they're just testing to see what the box is going to look like. Dilux is actually a DuPont trademark. I hope I don't owe them money for using that term. But this would just, rather than printing out a whole box, they would just do it in blue here, and just to look for, how does it look? Does it have typographical errors, anything like that? So it's just a little stage of the production process there.
And this is yet another playset from the Micro Collection. So they actually were going to introduce playsets from Return of the Jedi. They never actually made any Return of the Jedi playsets for the Micro Collection line because they canceled it before the movie came out. But this was going to be the Jabba Boiler Room playset. So it's about the only example anyone's ever found of this. And you know the film really well. You might see the kind of the trapezoid windows there are where that arm sticks out and grabs C-3PO when they're going through the Jabba's dungeon. But they were going to have a number of Jabba-themed play sets. We'll show you a slide of another one, a throne room, and then there was going to be a Rancor pit as well. They were going to interlock and form like a Jabba or at least a Tatooine world.
We got another playset where we're going to torture droids and things like that. So we're getting a theme here with Kinner's Micro Collection.
Yeah, and this is where all the torturing begins. This is Jabba's throne room. This is a wood pattern for the playset, so it's a very primitive early stage. You can kind of see where Jabba would sit on the throne to the right, but it's before they would use the pattern to kind of get the base design down, and this is a 2-up pattern, so it's about twice the scale the playset would have been.
To me, this is just really interesting because it shows how basic they start. You don't really ever think about that when you just are buying your toys off the shelf, and in the store. And here it is that somebody took some pieces of wood and just kind of roughly, worked this out and said, well, let's just have a little dais here for Jabba to stand on, and what do we have over here? We can have some little, nooks and crannies for things. And so it's just a very, very rough concept, just a very beginning from where it would go from there. Unfortunately, nothing else really has turned up on that from later stages.
In the playset we saw earlier, this is an example of a 2D representation of it. This is the Jabba Boiler Room, but it's a pencil sketch on vellum. And those of you familiar with design drawings or engineering drawings, you see that they'll sketch the toy from different angles so that you're able to create the 3-dimensional version of the toy more easily, and it exactly matches the prototype in the earlier slide.
This just really kind of shows you that this is work. This is not just a bunch of elves or whatever having a grand old time just throwing stuff together and magically you get toys. This is just like if you're going to build a house or kind of any kind of thing like that, you have to start off with your blueprints and work with all the basics there to engineer it and to get it all together. And there's just so much that goes into the development of the toys.
And so early stages when they're making the micro collection figures, they're small metal figures, but they'll make these things called 4-ups, and they're called 4-ups because they're 4 times the scale of the actual finished figure. And they're originally sculpted in wax at that scale, and it allows them to get a lot of detail before they miniaturize it. And then they make these things called hard copies. These are made out of urethane. What they do is from that they can use these early hard copies they use for tooling to get the exact tooling of the molds. They can also paint them up to be sale samples or photo samples to get multiple purposes. So a lot of collectors will throw around the term hard copy. They're usually like hard urethane handmade samples from the early line. And all of these here are these are 6 different characters that are unproduced characters from some of the play sets we showed you in earlier pages, and also some of the ones we didn't show you, like there is like the Luke in the X-Wing outfit is from a Dagobah playset. So there's also a Dagobah playset planned for the micro collection line.
The Luke that he's talking about has some interesting on the base, you know, kind of a Dagobah like ground. The Yodas and the things that are from this from this line also just have a similar ground texture, and so it just kind of shows how they were going to make that world very realistic to Dagobah. So here's a couple of the wax sculpts, and so it all begins with the sculpt. This would be the very first 3D representation that all of the finished metal figures come from. So every single one ever produced of that Boba Fett comes from this original Boba Fett sculpt. Same thing with the Han Solo and Carbonite there. And they're, again, 4 times the size of the finished product. You lose a lot of the detail, but it's necessary to do it in that larger scale in order to get there. And one of the things that's interesting that you'll notice here, usually they will pattern things out that have a lot of straight edges. So for example, the Han in Carbonite there, you see that the outer edge, the tray there is all patterned, whereas the inside is all wax. But for Boba Fett, for his gun, they actually carve that. Usually that would be a piece that they would pattern.
Here's some other wax sculpts as well. So there's Chewie from the Torture Chamber playset. They were going to make an Emperor's Throne Room that was going to be kind of this Death Star that would interlock like a New Hope and return the Jedi Death Star modules into like one big Death Star playset. And then Luke with Yoda from the Dagobah playset. So these are all 4-up scale, 4 times the scale wax sculpts of characters. All 3 of these are ones that were never made.
The Chewbacca there has a little peg in his back that would hold the backpack for the